back to our show. My name is Todd Ewing, and the name of my show is See the Heaven in Every Black Face. It's See the Heaven in Every Black Face, transform ourselves, transform our communities, claim our nobility. Now, I always like to make it clear to all of our guests that I try to see the heaven in every face, but this show is about what's taking place in the black community and how we can transform our communities, claim our nobility, that will ultimately change the way we act with each other, react with each other, and solve our problems coming from a place of nobility. Will change the interactions across the board in our communities. Now, as you can see, we are not at eLife Media Studios today. We are at the Serengeti Gallery and Cultural Institute on Central Avenue in Capitol Heights. And I'm here with Mr. Wyson West, who I've interviewed before. But unfortunately, we lost the interview, a technological glitch, and we lost the interview. So it turned out actually better, Wyson, because now we actually get to be in your gallery and in your institute, and we can actually take a look at some of the art that you have, the beauty that you have here. So I'm sorry that we lost that first interview, but I'm glad that we're in your studio. One of the things that I tell everybody is I try to interview people that are engaged in not only transforming themselves, but transforming their communities. And I think what you do here, what the gallery does, what the Institute does, fits the bill for this perfectly. And so I feel blessed that you have agreed to be a part of this interview.
Well, thank you for selecting the Serengeti for that purpose.
Yes, absolutely. Now, the show is See the Heaven in Every Black Face. And as I said, especially nowadays, everything that's going on in our society with race, with class, with culture, and with the things that have taken place in the black community, with the shootings of black men and black women, and now the shootings of the police, I think there needs to be a level of sensitivity that we really all need to try to see heaven in every face. But like I said, this is about the transformation of the black community. So that's going to be our focus. So I wanted to ask you, Wyson, when I wrote my book, Seeing Heaven in the Face of Black Men, I purposely picked that title because I know of all the negative images that exist out there about black men.
Right.
And I felt like if we started sharing this concept of seeing the heaven in black men at the time, then it starts to change the image we have in our own head, then it starts to change how we start to see ourselves, then it starts to change how we start to see each other and how we interact with each other. So I ask every guest, what does it mean to see heaven in every black face? What would that mean to you to see heaven in every black face? What would you be seeing?
Well, it's a rather profound question, and I would like to begin by saying thank you for coming here for the interview, and I hope that when you walked inside of the gallery, you experienced a little bit of heaven.
Always.
So let's talk about this concept of heaven. What does this mean to us? Well, when we think of heaven, we think of something that's beautiful, something that is just a wonderful, delectable place, if I can call it a place. And when I look at people, black people in particular, or African people in particular, I see heaven when I see that they are still steeped in their culture.
Mm-hmm.
Before there was heaven, there was a culture. A culture created this concept called heaven. So when we are detached from our cultural base, then we are missing a little bit of heaven. So when I look into a face and I see someone who is sure of who they are, who are connected to their cultural roots, and who are spiritual, that's when I see heaven, when they are connected culturally and spiritually.
I'm glad you said this thing about spirituality, because a lot of times I feel like we've lost some of that. I feel like that has been the history, that's been our strength. Religion and spirituality have been our strength. That's been our anchor point throughout our history, but I feel like some of us have sidelined what's really been the source of our strength. And so I'm glad you mentioned spirituality. I also think that sometimes it's hard as we engage with our brothers and sisters in the community, on the streets, in the stores, sometimes that heaven isn't obvious. Sometimes there's a facade. Sometimes because of life experiences that they've had, it's sometimes hard to see that heaven. But I think my premise is that it's there. It's beneath all that. And if we strive to see that heaven in each other's face, then it's going to change the way that we interact. It's going to change the way we solve problems. It's going to change the way we greet each other. And sometimes just greeting each other as if we see that heaven in that face can cause it to come out. And the spiritual piece, I think, is very important.
Yes, I don't think we can see heaven without being spiritually connected. And we must understand that America was called, and still often is called, the melting pot. Well, what does that mean? Melting into what? The Creator made us who we are. Many, many different cultures, many different languages, many different beliefs. So if we're melting, what are we melting into? And I think that is a question that we need to really consider. Going from where to where. And this is, unfortunately, has been one of the downfalls of the American system. People need to be allowed to be who they are as the Creator made them. So it's a problem, and I think that, it's something that we can deal with, but we have to look at it through the cultural lens, through the spiritual lens, and not through a religious or an economic lens.
No, I'm with you. I work with, I'm going to start this. I work with, I do work in race relations. And I've done a lot of work with black employees who work in environments that they're the few. And I just recently came back from doing a workshop, and these employees were demoralized being in this environment, and they're demoralized for the same reasons that you said, because they're experiencing what they call in the literature identity threat. In other words, they can't be themselves in the workplace. When they can't be themselves, they can't perform effectively.
Right.
And so then the stress level, and then they face this thing of not wanting to fit the stereotype that people have about them. So that adds another level of stress. And then they really feel like they can't be their true self, their heavenly self, their spiritual self, because they're not seeing in the proper light. So it's a very powerful thing to be able to be yourself. It's a simple thing to say, but our society doesn't allow that in many cases.
That's true, yes.
It really doesn't. And I won't go into this whole thing with these employees. It was very challenging for them. It's a very challenging place for them to work. But I want to get into a little bit of the art now, as I'm looking around, and we're gonna get a chance to explore some of the things that are in your gallery. But I told you the first time I interviewed you, I'm not an artist, and so I did a little bit of research. And one of the things that I found that struck me, and I know enough about art to know this, is about the Harlem Renaissance of
Right.
20s and 30s. And Lane Locke, who was the dean of the Harlem Renaissance, he was speaking about art at that time. And, he wrote the book, The New Negro, and it was an anthology of fiction and poetry, really about the Harlem Renaissance. But he said at that time, and I don't know if you'll have any reaction to this, he said about this Renaissance that was taking place, He said, the Negro life is seizing its first chances for group expression and self-determination. Harlem, he said, became the center of, and he must have been channeling you at the time. He said, Harlem has become the center of a spiritual coming of age, transforming social disillusionment into race pride. Does that strike you at all?
No, it's very powerful, and he was right on point. And we still face those same problems today. And a renaissance, the awakening. The African American was not meant to be awakened in this country. They wanted us to continue to slumber and sleep, but that doesn't go on forever. Someone is always going to stand up, and Lane Locke and many of the other Harlem Renaissance writers, they were the ones who began to open our eyes to the greatness of African people in particular, but the greatness of people in general. So, yes, he was the forefront, the early forebearer of getting African Americans to understand their connection to Africa, their connection to those inner spirits that the Creator gave. So yes, he was very much on point, and we're still striving with that even today. As we know, professional African Americans are some of the most neurotic employees.
That's true.
That's been proven many years ago, and there's a reason for that neuroticism. Fortunately, we are not as the Native Americans. They have been totally destroyed. And when you look around in an environment such as the United States and you say, as a Native American, this at one time was ours. Now it's all gone. We have nothing left. So we don't ever want to be relegated to that. So we must take a stand and believe in who we are, believe in the righteousness of our movement, which is to regain that sense of self that this society continues to try and take from us every day.
No, it's true. And Elaine Locke, around the same time he made the comments about as he said, a spiritual coming of age. He said that we needed a revolution
Right.
in our communities, and I think he was talking about the United States in general, but he said it has to be a revolution of the soul. He said it needs to be a revolution of the soul, and I think part of what he was seeing was that spirituality was expressed through art. And I want to quote now another woman who I researched, and again, I'm not going to pretend I know more about this than I do, but I wanted to have some background. Her name is Juanita Moore. She's the president and CEO of the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. And here's what she said. She said that the African American community thrives on the arts. It is one thing that has always been accessible. The ability to create, interpret, and reinterpret remained with us even through slavery. For many in African American communities throughout the nation, the power of the arts changed ordinariness into grandeur, sadness into joy, despair into hope, and history into possibilities. Art presented a total affirmation of black culture, which encouraged all of us to turn a conscious eye on the world in which we lived and gain the clarity and beauty of a fresh look at ourselves and our communities. I think that's just so well put.
Yes.
The power of the arts changed ordinariness into grandeur, sadness into joy, despair into hope and history. The thing I looked at. Tell me if this resonates for you with the visual arts. It says the visual arts recreates, creates, inspires, tells stories, inspires stories, preserves culture, advances culture, captures history, creates history, stretches the artist, and as an extension of the artist, expresses the essences of him or her in some cases, and so many aspects of their personality. Does that resonate for you?
Absolutely. She couldn't have said it better.
I know.
Couldn't have said it better. And the conquerors, the invaders of nations of other people, they understand the arts very well. They know that the first thing they must take away are the arts. So they destroy the artifacts. They prevent people from practicing the arts. They shut down the arts and entertainment. And all of the artifacts, they are either destroyed, desecrated, or removed from the people. The art is the soul of the universe, the soul of the people. So what she says is absolutely correct. And when you deny people this, you may deny them for a time, but they're always going to reach back and try and get back to the core, because that's who the Creator made them to be. We create things based upon our cultural milieu. And if we are separated from that and cannot create, there will be an explosion at some point where you have a renaissance. When Hitler took over Europe, he stole all the art and put it in boxcars and buried it under the mountains, robbing those European nations, those European tribes of their identity. Right. And that's the way the U.S., as we know it, it came into the Native Americans' land, and it created the National Endowment for the Arts and gave it millions of dollars trying to create a culture that was uniquely American at the expense of others. None of those funding went towards Native Americans.
Right.
None of it went towards African Americans.
Right.
It went toward this sense of whiteness. So they build up on one level and destroy on the other. But fortunately, we continue to create and recreate something that reflects who we are. And this is the spirit force within, or the God force that is within, that keeps us continuing to do that.
Which is amazing, really. When you think about the oppression that we've experienced, I mean, I think sometimes that oppression almost gets you so in touch with your soul. There has to be some expression, some creativity, some way that it comes out. And
Absolutely.
I think African Americans or people of African descent have always found ways to express, whether it's the pain, whether it's the joy, whether it's grief, whatever it is, finding expression in the variety of arts, whether it's song or whether it's visual arts, whether it's rap, or whatever it is, we found a way to get that out. And I think because of that, I mean, our country, our world's a better place. I mean, I look around at what you have here, and I remember the first time I came in here, and I wrote these words down about how I felt coming in here. I said, when you walk into Serengeti, there's a reverential feeling, as if you're going into an African oasis. And I know many people have used that term when they come here, an oasis.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, as you move through the gallery, your mind, or you might hear Count Basie. You might see the artwork of some high schoolers, or a beautiful rendition of Mr. Mandela, or black and white photos depicting the Million Man March. Elegant and picturesque African women. You might see a portrait of Dizzy Gillespie with those classic puffed out cheeks, or a portrait of Trayvon Martin with his Skittles. Pictures of brothers and sisters dancing in the 40s and 50s. You might see a contemporary work with the first family, President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama, hovering over everything. The classic pictures of women from Africa with baskets on their heads carrying water, and I remember rich colors everywhere balanced with simple black and white. And the thing that I said after that, and I'm not poetic, but this is just what I felt, this sort of energy engulfs you, feeling the pain and the promise, past and present. And I said it's almost too much to take in, and at the same time, there's such balance and grace. And that's what I feel like Serengeti Gallery and Cultural Institute really is. That's what I felt walking in, and those are the words that I used to express it. But I want to just ask you just a little bit about your background and how did you get to DC, or if you weren't born and raised here, a little bit about that, and then I want to talk about, why and how you started the gallery.
Mm-hmm. Well, before I tell you a little bit about my background, there is one other point that I'd like to make.
Sure.
With regard to the spirit, oppression. A plant can come through the hardest concrete in the world. It can find its way through, and that's the way African Americans have done in this country, and I'm sure in other places like Brazil and Colombia and other places around the world, but I can specifically talk about here. When we think of so many things here in this country, the African Americans have been at the forefront of making it what it is. You cannot talk about really any form of music without seeing these legends of African American performers and entertainers and composers who have created what we know as American music, be it jazz, be it blues, be it ragtime, be it even our classical music as we call it. African Americans have always been there, and we've made America what it is, even though we were in a very, very difficult situation here. So I think that's very important, how we do come through in spite of all of the obstacles. As for me, I was born in Ohio.
Midwestern.
Yes, that was my place of birth, and I was born during the Great Migration.
Okay.
That Isabel Wilkerson wrote so candidly about African Americans moving all over the country trying to find a better life. And my parents were part of that great migration. So I was born in Ohio, but then spent my first formative years in Arizona. And again, still on the road trying to find a way. Left Arizona and then moved on to the state of Oregon. I finished my high school there, graduated from the University of Oregon in political science and sociology, and then I found my way to the African continent in 1979. And I lived in Kenya and Tanzania 7 years, first as a Peace Corps volunteer and then as a Peace Corps associate director in Kenya and Tanzania for 7 years. And after leaving there, I came to Maryland. And this is where I set down my roots with my wife and 2 daughters 30 years ago in September. And this is where I've been, right here in Prince George's County.
So you grew up in a Midwestern environment. You spent time in a Midwestern environment. I spent time in a Midwestern environment, as you know.
That's right, yes.
I was born and raised in Minnesota, just around the corner.
That's right.
So the environment I grew up in was predominantly white. I don't know about your experience, but where I grew up, it was a predominantly white environment, and so I had those experiences of oppression, if you will,
Yes.
and trauma.
Yes.
But you also mentioned Oregon, which, again, I've only been there a few times, but I don't believe there's too many black folk there. And
No, there aren't. Not very many, but there are some who are doing very well. I think historically one of the best African American boxing groups came out of the state of Oregon, went to the Olympics. A great composer, African American, comes out of the state of Oregon.
all right, good to know.
Yes.
Well, Minnesota had Prince, so come on.
That's right. Some of the best things come out of there. You know, we produce quite a number of good personalities.
Yeah. Well, Kenya, Tanzania, contrast. I want to talk about that a little bit in a little bit, but so now I asked you this before, but how did you get involved in you said you're not an artist, or you said that, and I don't know.
Well, I think we're all artists to some extent or another, but I don't go around masquerading as an artist. I'm basically a cultural lawyer with a political background and economic background. So no, in some sense, I guess I'm a visionary because nothing was given to me. Nothing was given to us. So in order to bring this into fruition, I had to have some kind of artistic ability. But I'm not an artist.
I think you really are, but I understand your point. So, again, what motivated you to start the gallery? What made it the Gallery and Cultural Institute, as you call it? What was the genesis of that?
Well, at the time that I started it, I was not aware of Alain Locke and the Negro movement and how he began, back in the early 1900s. But I just knew that there was a need for this. And I never got into this for the economic reasons. I got into it because there was a need in our communities to know more about who we were, our history. And the only way we can know that is really through the arts. Because the arts, the visual artists, they paint a picture. If there's no picture, we can't get that 1,000 words of knowledge. So with my political and historical background, I knew that this was critically important and that it was missing. I lived in East Africa for 7 years. And I knew that the people who were coming into Africa were primarily going in there to see the wildlife, to see the landscape, and say jumbo to a few Africans and go back home just the way they arrived. So I wanted to come back here into this area and let people know there's another Africa out there that they're not showing you. They don't want to show you. If I get on an airplane and I travel from here to East Africa, and I'm only one of maybe 5 African Americans on that plane and everybody else are Caucasian, that tells me that something is wrong.
Right.
So I said, this should not be that way. Those who have been taken from the continent, they need to get to know it. So that was one great motivating force that told me that I had to do this. And we've been doing it here in the county now for 30 years. I've been doing it over 40 years because I was involved with this when I was at the University of Oregon in the 70s. So it's been...
So the inspiration started early.
Yeah, I think it started from childhood because I never watched Tarzan and Jane when I was, 6, 7 years of age. I said, something's wrong with that picture.
Yeah, something didn't feel right.
Yeah, I stopped that when I was a kid.
Yeah, I didn't have that insight. Sorry, I watched it. I didn't learn till later.
It's okay, you learned.
I did learn. But the significance of the name Serengeti, how did you decide on that name?
Well, that was not the first name. I think that a name is very important.
It is.
And when I named my businesses, I first started with Business Exchange International.
Huh.
That was where I began in 1986, and it was not copying Belafonte Enterprises Incorporated. I didn't even know he had a BEI until much later, but for me, it was a significant name because in Swahili, BEI, the acronym, means there's a price. What is the price? And that reminded me to ask the question every morning, what price am I willing to pay to make this happen? So we went from Business Exchange International, then to Gallery of African Wildlife and Contemporary Art. And at that time, I was promoting the African master painters of African wildlife and landscape. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and the Africans are not known. They get none of that revenue. You or I or somebody can go there and in 1 week they become an expert on African wildlife and come back here, and then they get all of the accolades and make all the money, while the true masters in Africa, they get nothing. So I represented a number of African painters depicting the wildlife and the landscape of East Africa. So that was the second name. And then later on, I moved on to Serengeti Gallery because it was a much smaller name. It didn't cost as much to get a sign made to put on the storefront.
There's the practical reasons as well as
That's
the deeper reasons, right?
Yes, right. But I didn't give up anything. Serengeti, when you think of Serengeti, you think of Maasai, you think of Mount Kilimanjaro, you think of the wildlife, the zebras, the lions, the rhino. All of those things are part of the Serengeti Plains of East Africa, from whence a lot of us have historical connections. Yeah.
So, with all that, you shared really some of your philosophies just in the conversation that we're having, and your feelings about people of African descent, our experiences. And so, in terms of the choices, what you choose to put in the gallery, how do your philosophies influence that, and how do you determine what you think, I don't want to say is worthy of being in the gallery, but what you think is fitting to be in this gallery? How do you make the choice?
My decisions in selecting the art for the gallery, there are economic reasons, the financial reasons why I do it, but more importantly, I select the art that helps us with our vision as to where we need to carry people so that they can be better connected with the spiritual force that we talk about through the art. And just looking around, I can see a piece of Muhammad Ali here in the gallery. Need I say more? We must have him here for what he represented. Then I see an abstract piece here in the gallery. Well, we have African Americans who are abstract artists. Abstraction came out of Africa, didn't come out of Europe. So we just look at things that are a little bit different and that encourages people to be a little bit challenged. And we also have to understand that people have great abilities to grow and to move forward, and you can't continue to put the same thing in front of them day after day. You must encourage them, in fact, compel them to continue to grow and learn more about themselves and the greatness that exists within.
You know, you keep coming back to the spiritual part and the spirit that gets conveyed to the art, which I think exactly is what happens when you come in here. I think your commitment to that vision permeates the atmosphere. As I said, the oasis as you walk in. I think it would be wonderful to really walk around just a little bit and share some of the pieces of maybe why you chose those particular pieces, and so people get a little bit of a feeling for the gallery.
Sure.
And what's here.
Sure. Let's do that.
Let's do that. And
Okay. Where do we begin?
where do we begin? Well, this piece right behind you fascinates me, and I've been looking at it.
Well, if you just look at it, the first thing that you think of is a woman carrying a bowl on her head. And then you see how she's nicely adorned there with her colorful dress and all. But then as you begin to look at it, you start learning more about it. There's a river running behind her, trees along the embankment. And if you look at her attire, you will begin to see that it's abstraction, but there are words in the piece called In Search for the River of Life. And again, that's an artist from Nigeria, and he's using the Uli style of art, but he's incorporated something a little bit more. I don't know if you can see here, but this is In Search for the River of Life. So again, back to that spirituality of the universe.
And then right next to it, I mean, again, these are two juxtaposed. This one has another kind of elegance to it.
Yes. This is an artist out of Sierra Leone, and what can we say, a very beautiful African woman with a little bit of mysteries surrounding her as she peeks through the veil there. But again, an artist out of Sierra Leone, very nice aesthetics that are appealing to the African American, particularly in this country, but should be appealing to anyone who appreciates art.
So how do you connect with these folks? How do they find you? Do you find them? How does it, both?
We do both, yes. I'm mindful that I've been doing this here in the county for 30 years, but I've been in the arts for over 40 years. And I've traveled around the world, and a lot of artists find us that way.
And then, of course, we've got the champ. So many photos here.
Yes.
So much life, so much energy.
Yes.
One of the things that, and we talk about artistic expression. I mean, he was artistic expression. Poetry in motion, right?
Absolutely.
The whole concept of poetry in
Absolutely.
motion. But one of the things about him, and I think every picture you see of him, almost you see in him such conviction. One of the things as I listened to him speak, and again, to me, this is an artistic expression as well. Listen, when he was prevented from boxing, he went around these colleges, as you know, and spoke and gave lectures, gave many lectures, and not just in colleges. And I would watch the audiences watch him, and I knew that some of the things he was saying, they didn't necessarily agree with. But his conviction was so strong, they were compelled to listen. And I think that was a gift, that was an artistic gift he had. It's something that expressed through him his just strong conviction about his beliefs, and everything was 100%.
Yes, and he would not allow anyone to take away his humanity. And he held on to that until the very last day, even in his last gasp, I'm sure. he held on to that.
He did. And his and part of him, you know, we don't want to spend a long time on him because there's other things to see, but we could talk about him forever, but part of, I think, his gift to us was that we got to see his imperfections along with his perfections, which in one sense makes you even more human.
That's right.
Because we all know that we have them. But his humanity showed through in so many ways. I remember Ken Norton, a lot of people don't know this, had an accident, a car accident, a bad car accident, was in a coma for a long time. And Muhammad Ali went to see him when he was in that coma. And the doctors said that when Muhammad Ali was there, he responded. And somehow, even in that coma, he responded to Muhammad Ali's energy. So something was going on with him.
Yes, and America responded to him
Yeah, they did.
out of our comatose state.
Oh, very good.
Yes.
Good connection. There's so many things I'd like to look at, but can we move over here just a little bit? Does that work? I'm looking at
Dizzy Gillespie.
Dizzy Gillespie,
Yes,
classic,
yes. The only
Yeah.
one. Just like that.
a style of his own.
Yes, he and Miles Davis, two of the greatest, who transformed the musical landscape of America.
Absolutely.
Bebop.
So as we're walking around, I started to think, I explained to you what I felt when I walked in here. What is it you want people to experience when they come through the gallery? What do you want them to walk away with?
Well, I want them to walk in here and feel like they have walked into heaven, if I can use that word.
Of course.
And that heaven is all in black and white. It's all from the African context. And if they can walk in here, feel that way, and leave feeling that way, it's been a very good day for me. Because I see the children who come in, and in 30 years of doing this here in the county, I've never, ever seen a child want to leave. They always ask if they can stay, and the mother or father says, no, we have to go. And then you know what the children do, they ask, well, when can we come back?
Right.
So if we are doing that, then we know that we're making an impact. And the same applies to adults as well. They say, well, you know, we can't stay out of here. Well, that's good, but then again, I encourage them. What you feel and sense here, you can have that right there in your home. So take it home and create that space, create that oasis there for yourselves.
And of course, there's one, we've definitely got to look at our president, our first lady, the two beautiful children. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, it was a piece that was executed by 3 different artists. And the wonderful thing is that 2 of them were a couple, husband and wife, and the third was a friend by the name of Monk who worked with them on the piece. And it represents the African diaspora. Monk, the artist, comes from Florida. He was a graduate student at Howard University. And the McBeebs, husband and wife, they come from Ethiopia. Hence the very brilliant colors that you see in the piece. Okay, so to have had those 3 artists collaborate and make this happen and pull together the first family and then told the story of the Africans rising from the South with Frederick Douglass and King there in the picture and Harriet Tubman. It's quite a powerful story. And then seeing Barack Obama pulling the established senators and congressmen, getting them to support him as he runs for the presidency of the United States. So there's a lot going on in there that it's a powerful statement, and very happy to have that piece here.
And I want to look at this piece here. You've got a couple like this. So you've got without the facing, right? Without the, I
Yes.
don't know if that has some symbolism, some meaning, but, again, I was drawn to these and one that's over here as well in a very similar way.
Yeah, well, these are by a Nigerian artist, his name is Ola. And just looking at them, you can tell that he comes from the Colorfield school. And his works are primarily like this, but he's telling a story in them as well. And I don't know exactly what he's saying down here, but you can put your own words into there, you know. Two men sitting there with a suitcase and another person sitting there in the front. Maybe they're waiting at a bus station, but he's telling it from his perspective as a Nigerian painter who's living here in the U.S. So, again, our efforts to bring in various artists who are not doing something that would be traditionally seen as Nigerian art.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Beautiful.
Well, every time I turn one direction, I see something else I want you to talk about, and I could go this direction, but this is another one.
Perhaps you can tell me what you're saying there. I'll let you become the art curator.
Well, you know, I'm not an art curator, and now I'm looking up more closely. When I was at a distance, I thought of one thing, but now that I'm closer, it's not what I originally thought.
Uh-huh.
You know, it's so interesting because I have the middle passage so locked in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
When I was standing at a distance,
Mhm.
all I could think of was, you
Middle
know,
passage.
but now that I'm up close, it's obviously well, I wouldn't say obvious, but that's not what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to defer to the,
Well, I see an urban scene in Sierra Leone where you can look at the fish here in the foreground. Here we talk about bringing home the bacon, but here they may be bringing home the fish. There's a lot of activity of people at work, people in motion. So this is basically what we're seeing here, the houses in the background. A little what is it, a gecko coming down the wall over there. So this showing the urban scene in this particular part of Africa. And this is the artist Eloge, and I have a number of his pieces here in the gallery.
you know, you said gecko, my granddaughter has a gecko at home, so
Oh.
we're connected.
That's right.
You know, you mentioned, we're almost out of time here, but, you know, just experiences that people have had when they've come here. I think the last time we talked, I don't know if you recall, you told a story about a child who came here. Do you remember that story?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Can you share that, because it struck me?
Well, there was a young boy, can't remember his name right now. He was about 4 years of age. And he came into the gallery with his father, and then shortly after he was in here, I heard him beginning to whimper, and then almost to the point of crying. And he was telling his father as he was gripping his leg that he was afraid and he wanted to leave. And I watched that for a minute, and then after a while I called him over. I got down on my knees and I called him over. I said, "What is it?" He said, "I'm afraid and I want to go." And the tears were coming down. And I said, "Okay, but will you make me a promise?" And through his tears he says, "Yes, I will. Will you promise to come back and see me another day?" And he promised that he'd come back, and he did. The second time he came back, which was about 2 weeks later, he came in through the door with his father, and he still held on to his father, but he gradually made his way to me. I was standing about over here on the floor. And when he came, I got down and I embraced him. And I said, "Tell me what it is that frightens you." That was the beginning of 3 other sessions where he came back to see me. And he now runs into the gallery the next time I see him, and he runs up to me and he jumps up and he says, "Teach me." That's what he did, teach me. And the last time I saw him, he came through the door with his father, and he had his cousin with him, his same age. And he took her and went right past me, and he started teaching her everything that he learned in the gallery. And the mask that he was previously afraid of, he went over and he showed it to her, and he touched her, and he told her what it was. So that was one of the, very moving stories that I've had. I've had many, but when you get children at that age and they embrace this and they're no longer fearful of what is their heritage, then we know that we're making progress.
Yeah, transformative experience for them.
Transformative, absolutely. Yes.
So, and I know we're just about out of time, but in addition to these beautiful paintings and the photos, you also have programs here.
Yes.
I know you have arts program for the kids. This summer you had arts program for the kids. You show documentary films here. You have workshops here. Anything you want to say? Anything else you want to say about the programs that you have here? The purpose of the programs.
Well, the programs are all educational, and they're fun, insightful, enlightening, and we have them going on all the time. And the art is educational as well, but then there's the other component that we have to share with others. So we do that as a means of giving people the opportunity to learn and to embrace their heritage. The Museum of African American History is getting ready to open.
I was going to mention that.
On the 24th of September.
Right.
Yes, and they just called us a couple days ago, someone from there, and said that they were going to have a lot of satellite events leading up to the opening. They said, how can we do this and not involve Serengeti? So we will be working with them to put together a program. We're going to do a musical journey starting from Africa and going right through Elaine's Lock period, through the Harlem Renaissance, to the bebop movement, to jazz, to the great Coltrane's and Miles Davis, Dizzy, right through hip hop and rap. We're going to do that musical journey from Africa to the present.
And so that'll be on your website. People can access it through that.
That'll be on the website, and if they want to get in here, they'll have to sign up early because,
Yeah, they will.
yes.
They will.
So we're going to be doing that.
Will that be before the 24th or leading up to?
That'll be on the 25th. 24th is a Saturday. We will hit that on the 25th, that Sunday.
Can I sign up now?
Yeah, I think you need to.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
Wyson, this has been powerful. I appreciate it very much. I'm so glad that we're able to do the interview, like I said, in the studio or in the gallery, so people get this, at least experience and get a feeling for it. We're at 7919
Central
Avenue.
Yes.
And you're open Tuesday through,
Saturday, Sunday, and Monday by appointment.
okay?
I'm here 7 days a week, so that's how we operate.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
So I invite everybody to come by and experience this. It's quite an experience. It never gets old. There's always something new to see. And, thank you for having the vision. Thank you for having the heart. Thank you for having the courage to continue. And really, you're what the show is about. Transform ourselves,
Yes.
transform our communities, claim our nobility, and see the heaven in every black face.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Winston.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then the history of this and that and the other, and I'm going like, I know something. I know a lot about Native American history, but they've been totally wiped out. There are no monuments. Can't tell them about this, can't tell them about that. And I turn around several times and say, I'm sorry, dear, this is what they've done to you. The only thing I can do is try and do my best to show you what I can show you. There's the Anacostia, there's the Potomac. That was named, those are Native American names. Okay, and then I took it to the Native American Museum. And I've done, so my point is that I can feel Ananda.